Hey guys, today we're comparing the 7600X3D to the 7800X3D in Tarkov. The 7600X3D was originally launched as a Micro Center exclusive, and you could only get it by going to the store. These days you can find it online, but they still cost more than they do at Micro Center. As of March 2026, the 7600X3D is $200 at Micro Center, which makes it, in my opinion, one of the best value gaming CPUs you can buy right now. The 7800X3D costs around $370. That's about 85% more than a 7600X3D. But could it actually be 85% better? In this video, we'll see how big the performance gap really is, whether that extra cost is worth it, and which one makes more sense if you're building a Tarkov rig. Quick side note, back in February, I set a goal to hit 25k subs by July, and we actually crushed that goal in about 4 weeks. 6 weeks in, we're already at 35k. So seriously guys, thank you guys so much for the support. It means a lot. Since we're already past 25, I've adjusted my target to 50k by July. So if you find this helpful, please consider subscribing to support the channel. These videos do take a ton of time to test and put together. Both CPUs were tested on the same configuration. I'm using an ASRock X870E Nova motherboard, 64 gigs of DDR5 running at 6000 CL30, and for storage I'm using an Orico 07000 Gen 4 M2 NVMe. For the GPU, I'm using my Zotac Solid 5090 to keep things as CPU bound as possible. In terms of tuning, they were very similar. The 7600X3D hit 2200 F-clock, while the 78 was at 2100. Both were running a -25 PBO undervolt. SMT was disabled and resizable bar was enabled on both configurations. If you want to see my full tuning process, check out my 7800X3D tuning guide linked in the top right. This applies to the 7600X3D as well. For in-game settings, I'm using my Pure 70 preset. Basically, that's my optimized high texture graphics preset. If you want more details on that, check out my optimization and settings guide linked in the upper right. For this comparison, the tests were run on Streets of Tarkov, running my usual route from Klimov Street into Lexos. Basically, that's the most demanding section of the map. As a result, these testing numbers are going to be a little bit lower than what you'd normally see in a typical raid, and that's intentional. This route is meant to stress the CPUs as much as possible, so we can get a clear comparison between them. If you want to see the actual numbers you'll see throughout the raid, you can check out some of the benchmarks that I've posted on my channel as well. Alright, so let's get into the results. Starting at 1080 offline, this is where things should be the most CPU bound. So this is where you'd expect to see the biggest separation. The 7800X3D comes in at 105 FPS average compared to 100 on the 7600X3D. That's about a 5% lead. The 1% lows are only about 2 to 3% apart, and the 0.1% lows are pretty much identical. So even though there is a small difference here in terms of actual gameplay feel, it was basically a wash. At 1440 offline, things look very similar. The 7800X3D still holds a small lead, about 4% in average FPS, but again, the lows are nearly identical. If you look at the actual numbers and compare them to 1080, the numbers are almost the same and the differences are almost the same. In 4K offline, the results are basically stacked on top of each other again. You've got around a 6% difference in average FPS. Lows are almost identical, and if you look at the numbers from all three tests, they're almost the same. So you can really see how CPU bound this game is. Even if we move up in resolution, the numbers basically stay the same. Now moving on to online raids at 1080, this is where things start to separate a little bit more than offline. The 7800X3D is about 7% ahead in average FPS, but more importantly, we've got a 4 to 5% difference on the 1% lows, and a little bit over 3% difference on the 0.1% lows. And yeah, it's not a massive difference, but the gap is slightly larger than it is in offline mode once you add the server, player, AI, and network variables. In 1440 online, the gap becomes even more consistent across the board. About 7% lead in average FPS, lows around 5 to 6% apart. In 4K online, the trend continues. The 7800X3D maintains about a 7% lead again in average FPS, with about the same gap in the lows as well. So no matter the resolution, the difference between the two chips is basically the same. So overall, the numbers were very close. The 7800X3D did have about a 7% advantage in average FPS, with a similar advantage in the lows. It's not a night and day difference, and without knowing beforehand, it would be very hard for me to tell which chip I was using. That's how close the performance actually feels. In terms of power draw and temps, they were basically identical. The 7800X3D pulled about 3% more power and was about 3% warmer. So technically there is a difference, but I'm going to call that a wash. So what does that all boil down to in terms of value? When you look at the pricing as of March 2026, the 7800X3D is going for around $370, while the 7600X3D is $200 at Micro Center. You must live near a Micro Center to get this pricing. That's the only caveat here. So that's about an 85% increase in cost for roughly a 5 to 7% performance gain. If you live near a Micro Center and you're deciding between these two chips, to me, the 7600X3D is a no-brainer. You're paying a little over half the price for about 93 to 95% of the performance, and that gives you a little extra cash to put towards that expensive RAM or to just keep in your pocket. Even if you don't have access to Micro Center, the 7600X3D is around $250 on Amazon right now, and it's still the better value even at that price. And this is where the 7800X3D gets a little bit awkward. It's definitely the better performer, but the price to performance just isn't there compared to the 7600X3D because the 3D cache makes a lot more difference than 2 extra cores. So to me, the 7800X3D just doesn't really make sense because you'd have to spend an extra $170 for a 5 to 7% gain over the 7600X3D. I think the next step up from the 7600X3D that makes sense is the 9800X3D. That's a bigger jump from the 7800X3D, but you're also getting a 30 to 40% improvement as opposed to a 5 to 7% improvement. But for those who want the best value, right now I think the 7600X3D is the pick. The next one that's worth the money is the 9800X3D or the 9850. Otherwise, I would save that extra cash for the next upgrade or just pocket it. Alright guys, that's all I've got for this one. If this video helped you make a buying decision, please consider using the affiliate links down below to make those purchases, as it really does help support the channel going forward. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more Tarkov benchmarks and optimization content like this. If you have any questions, feel free to join the Discord and shoot me a message. My username is Puri. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.